Well, in some ways, I think of it as like it's kind of in some ways a critique of media culture and in terms of the representation of war, because this is like sort of one person's particular view. But it's also at the same time, in some ways, a very critique of the structure that enabled you to go there. Because again, if we think about the war artist, you know, like these images historically have largely been aggrandizing, sort of glorifying images of war, and it's only sort of in the 20th century that we begin to see images that sort of question this notion of war. And you know, you were saying earlier that these images actually are not war-like at all. Like they're largely about sort of the structure of war, the support of war.
That's right. Yeah, they're very much involved with that. And my reflection on a longer range reflection on being there in 2002 and what is happening now in 2007, particularly in that area, is that these images actually reflect a bit of a calm before the storm. They're kind of, it was a very organized kind of sense of what was going on in the air base at that point. And of course there's, the war has been, since 2002, we're now in 2007, has actually escalated. So even though I was there for a short period of time, it's a very particular and interesting period when I was there, and also caused me to reflect basically on what these images mean in relationship to my observations of many of the images that have been created through journalistic process over the years in relationship to Afghanistan.
Can you talk a little bit about the involvement of Camilla Gibb and the text that she's written to accompany the exhibition?
Yeah, Camilla Gibb, who's a writer out of Toronto. I had met Camilla actually when I was living in Banff, and she was quite interested in the work that I had done on a similar assignment in Somalia, and has one of my triptych pieces from that experience. In Camilla's background, she has a PhD in anthropology, and she was her studies, and she had spent some time in Ethiopia, so she spent time in East Africa. She's written a book that her most recent book, which relates to an experience of a young woman who grows up Muslim. Camilla just seemed like the kind of person, and her kind of approach, I love her writing anyway, that it would be really interesting to bring her in on the project. So our relationship was, she accepted the notion of doing a fictional piece, although this fictional piece is based on fact, but it is literature. And my interest was in having someone come into the project from a language point of view where, in a sense, new art was being created. But it was being created out of some kind of inspiration or some kind of association with the images that I was doing, or where those images came from. So that became part of that, in a sense, the collaborative aspect of the process.
What's really nice about reading that text is when you first are introduced to it, you're introduced to the narrator, which is this I, and you're not really sure as a reader whether the I is in fact you, Allan MacKay, experiencing sitting on the edge of your cot in this tent in Afghanistan, newly arrived in Kandahar Air Base, or whether it's some sort of fictional personage. And that kind of confusion at the beginning is a really kind of nice introduction to the exhibition. You get a sense that this could be, you know, the person who's experienced the very things that you are experiencing. Right. So it's a very kind of enigmatic little piece as well. It's quite lovely.
Well, it's very enigmatic, and it's very much involved with, as the narrative puts through, with a kind of sense of duplicity and complicity and contradiction and shifting positions in relationship to what major conflict can do to people, and how things get really bent out of shape in terms of some of the notions of straightforward kind of ethical conduct. So I thought it was really quite a brilliant.
Well, in that way, I think you've actually just described your own exhibition.
Well, I didn't want to do that directly.
Right. Thanks, Alan. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
We're never getting through this, are we?